Sky News Studios in Melbourne, live. The Bolt Report. Now, Andrew Bolt.
Welcome to the show. What sort of people do we want in our parliament? The very smart, the smooth, the honest, the very ordinary perhaps. Whatever. Not many people wanted Ricky Muir. In fact, this election will have a new voting system for choosing senators specifically designed to get rid of him and others like him. Muir was an unemployed sawmiller when he decided just a few months before the last election to put up his hand to go to Canberra. His cause? Essentially to argue for the right of four-wheel drive owners to drive over more of our country. Now just 17,000 Victorians, about 0.5%, gave Muir their first vote. But so weird was our voting system, it's now been changed, that he still became a senator by getting the preferences of more than 30 minor parties through deals worked out amongst themselves. Well, those kinds of deals are now virtually ruled out. Voters have to nominate their own preferences on the ballot paper. And Muir is probably toast. But should we be glad? When Ricky Muir first went up to Canberra, he was a national joke. At least, according to journalists. He was the proof that the voting system was broken. He was the man laughed at for throwing kangaroo poo when camping with his mates. Although, to be honest, the declaration here, I've got to say, I've got an uncle who'd be up for that too, and who's yet so grounded that he'd be sure to do a better job than this lot on cutting government waste. Hello, Uncle Bert. And Muir was so nervous with his first interviews that he couldn't breathe.
People that are losing the jobs, sorry, can we go to another question? I've just got myself in a fluster. Take a breath. Can I go out for a minute?
There was a lot of horse laughing about that too, but let me tell you, it might seem easy, us just sitting here talking to you through this TV camera, but I've seen even top journalists freeze doing it right in front of my eyes. And I want to point out a few things. First, people I respect said if they wanted to talk to Muir, get his support for something or other trying to sell, they got a serious hearing. He thought about stuff. And he got smoother, more confident. He voted down that crazy carbon tax. And he didn't do mad stuff like vote for stimulus checks to dead people like Kevin Rudd or vote for laws to pay off sleazy union mates. He won't go out of Parliament a disgrace like, in my opinion, that buffoon Clive Palmer. No, I wish he'd voted against more spending cuts. I think he should have done that. But I will forgive him a lot for this reason. Muir was actually elected for a 6-year term. But he'll lose his job just halfway through because the government has called a double dissolution election where all senators, not just half of them, have to face the voters. Muir could have tried to save his job. He just needed to back the government's bill to create the Australian Building and Construction Commission, a sort of watchdog. But by helping to block it twice in the Senate, that gave the government the formal trigger it needed for this special election. Now, Muir knew that by voting against that bill, he'd be cutting short the best-paying job of his career, but he still followed his conscience. Not many politicians I know would put their principles above their career. One more thing. A lot of Australians, maybe you, are stuck in unglamorous jobs. Jobs that don't let them show what they've really got, what they can really rise to. But some, miraculously, they do get a chance. There have been some famous examples of people who've risen to that opportunity. The train driver Ben Chifley became one of our prime ministers. I'm not saying Ricky Muir is a Chifley, but people can grow with a challenge. And Ricky Muir, well, let's ask him what he's made of his amazing opportunity. Ricky Muir joins me now. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I hope your ears weren't blushing.
No, that was an interesting journey throughout my very short political career.
Ricky, how scared were you when you first went to Canberra?
Can I stare down the barrel of the camera and just freeze right now?
Yeah, go right ahead.
I was petrified.
We've got water in here somewhere for you. I tell you, no, when I first looked, the first time I did this kind of thing back in Channel 10, I tell you what, I was hyperventilating, and luckily it was a pre-record. I had to do it 4 or 5 times to get it out. And you had to grow up in front of the camera doing this stuff. This is amazing.
I went from just being an ordinary blue-collar worker with no media experience whatsoever to having to make decisions that are going to affect every cohort of society in the public, in the view of the public. Staring down the barrels of the camera and knowing that I was reaching all corners of the country, that's very, very intimidating.
Is that what was going through your mind with that Mike Willesee one then, when you froze? What happened there?
Well, apparently nothing. Look, in all honesty, I could hear my heartbeat over everything else. My heart rate was just through the roof. The anxiety was very strong.
You start hearing yourself speak,
Absolutely.
which is you hear an audio feedback.
He was asking very simple questions, which I should have been able to answer incredibly easily. But the anxiety took over. The reality that I wasn't only just away from my family for the first time ever. I was in Boston, away from my family, sitting in front of the great Mike Willesee. It was
who you'd grown up with watching.
Yeah, I've watched him as a child growing up, and it was an experience which. I never expected to see myself in, and it was very nerve-wracking. But
the other thing too is like that's just the mechanics, right? And it took me ages to get over my fear of the camera, right? But another thing that must have scared you, well, it would have scared me, is that what the hell do I know? I mean, you didn't come from a background where you're into the political culture, and you're suddenly asked to cast a vote on all sorts of things and all sorts of topics. Did that scare you? Yeah,
definitely. So I'm no economist, and. A lot of the decisions we make here involve industry and how it interacts, or how the community might interact with that industry, and how that industry interacts on a global scale. And to be thrust into that position with no background whatsoever in that, you have to find very quickly people that you can trust around you. And I tell you what, in politics, it is hard to find people to trust.
Your office turnover at the beginning was...
Well,
my goodness.
Evidently,
so
that's
like a laundromat.
And it was very public too. So evidently, I'm not the only person who's had those sort of issues in the very beginning. But I think I'm the first one to have such a public turnover of staff.
Media was on the watch to see you fall.
Yeah, and I mean, rightfully, they probably had every right to be sitting back thinking, "Oh, this guy's going to fail. He's not going to do any good."
But because it comes to the basic question, like I like the fact that people come from all parts of the country to get into Parliament. But I want to know that they know stuff and they have judgment. You didn't know much stuff to start with. Do you know much stuff now?
Oh, I can pick up the phone and find out anything I want. But no, look, in the reality, I've got a much broader understanding of how the Senate works and the responsibility of the Senate. And I know that it's not all that hard to pick up the phone and speak to a minister about the specific legislation that they're trying to put forward, try to understand their position, go out into the community and speak to stakeholders that's going to affect. And of course, we have the blessing of being able to have staff who you can get from a variety of different backgrounds. And it makes sense that I've got a lawyer within my team. So that way, anything that needs those legal technicalities looked at, he's there to be able to do that straight up, and it helps make my job a lot easier.
What do you bring to that then? Your judgment, or what is it that you bring to the table?
Look, my judgment and my background, so not just a blue-collar background, but a blue-collar background completely away from politics. I can, what I like bringing to the Senate is just that real-life experience, and the fact that I haven't lost those connections. I go out in the community when sitting's not on, and I'd actually go and speak to people, farmers in a paddock, about how they perceive a certain bit of legislation and how it may affect them, rather than going to the city to the red carpet events. It's that connection.
You reckon
with
it makes
people.
a difference? A good difference?
It does. So for me, it just gives me a bit of a feel for what people within the community are thinking about.
When you've got that, where have you been? Like, the political class is in one side of the debate, but because of what you're talking about, you're on the other, from your background. What sort of arguments are you talking about?
Well, from a consumer perspective, I suppose. I'm trying to think of a specific piece of legislation that might be of relevance.
Like I keep railing about, you know, the groupthink of the media class, like the boat issue right now, you know, where the media is going at Malcolm Turnbull and going at Immigration Minister Peter Dutton saying, how dare you speak the truth about refugees, shut up, racist, all that kind of stuff, and aren't you embarrassed? And I'm thinking, out in the burbs, out in the farms and all that, people are interested in issues of national identity and security and boats.
Yeah. Look, that's probably actually...
And they're not racist, by the way, either.
Well, no, and that's a really good part of a really good avenue to go down, I suppose. You know, there is... My view is, when we're dealing with the likes of immigration, we have to absolutely have compassion, and I believe I've displayed that throughout my time. But if you get down to nuts and bolts and speaking to people in the community, they want to know that the people that we're allowing into the country are you know, sound people, safe people. If we have some kind of intervention in a country, and it's maybe what's going on in that area is aided by maybe aerial drops or something from us, maybe we have some kind of responsibility to try to look after those who are genuinely in need. And that's the feeling from within the community.
We don't want to be taken for fools. Don't want to be taken for a ride.
No, there has to be those checks and balances. People got to come in the front door, not the back window. That's, you know, and there's a lot of people who absolutely say that they support being able to look after people in need at a time of need, but they would rather see avenues open through the front door for it to happen.
What is the best thing you've done, do you think, as a senator?
I knew a question like this might be asked, and the reality was, I don't know. It's just being there, just being in the Senate, and there's certain things that I've tried introducing, like a mandatory code for service and data repair for independent repairers. I'm really proud of that. Hasn't got much media attention yet. I haven't been able to introduce it, and I haven't been able to convince the minister that it's a great idea, but that conversation started. I've introduced a private senator's bill for a healthcare card for life for type 1 diabetics. Incredibly proud of that, and that was just the beginning. The apprenticeship's over. I've just introduced my first bill. I'm going to continue to do this for 6 years. Things like...
well, what's the worst thing you did then? What was your worst mistake? I'd say Ricky Muir voting against spending cuts that this country needs, Ricky.
Well, that's probably a really good example of the real-life experience I bring in. So 6 months wait for the dole and so on. 6 months is ridiculously long.
All right, that was ridiculous. Okay,
and you can see, you know, when the government pulled it back down to 4 weeks, you can see what they're trying to achieve. They're trying to get a cohort of people who genuinely just don't appear to be trying their hardest to get into the workforce to do so. But the experience that I've had in my life is when you're at a point where you're at absolutely rock bottom and you have absolutely nothing, receiving less only sends you down an absolute spiral where it takes a lot longer to get out of. And one thing that people with no money do when they actually get it is spend it. So they get it back into the economy. So I was trying to look at that from the steps I'd taken through my life. However, I was also, you know, absolutely understanding where the government was trying to go with that. So you know, there are areas, and I've been very pragmatic the whole time. The government of the day is the government of the day, whether it's the Labor Party or the Liberal National Party. You know, they do have a right to try to govern, and I don't see my role as a role to be an obstructionist. It's just try to...
Well, you voted against enough stuff.
Well, actually, I'm glad you said that. We've been working that out within the office, and it is actually around about 44% thereabouts with the government, 44% thereabouts against the government, and around about 12% of abstentions. And that's actually not off all bills. There's notice of motions, and maybe somebody's trying to suspend standing orders or whatever it may be. That, you know, your voting record actually goes down to a variety of different factors. But relatively centrist politics, according to the stats that we managed to come up with, completely centrist politics.
Was kind of hooking up with Clive Palmer a mistake?
No.
Man's a buffoon. I could see that a million miles away, and you're actually sitting next to him.
The learning curve. The learning curve was incredibly huge. And
you need to be told that this guy's a buffoon?
For me, I've never had any media training, and it probably even shows right now. I'm not the best in front of a camera, but sitting back, watching his style was actually something that was... you know, it's different. His style is absolutely different, but I was able to sit back and watch that.
It's got shyster written all over it. It's not a shyster, it's just...
but from there I was able to compare it to the way other people were conducting themselves in the media, and I got to learn what maybe I wouldn't do.
Well, I don't know. Now listen, we were told, well, I've written it myself, I'll be honest, feral Senate. I said it a million times because all these reforms weren't getting through. And I thought, not so much of you, but particularly people like Jackie Lambie and all that. I thought, how on earth does any government deal with this bunch? And so I kind of like the idea if someone say to me, we can tighten up the Senate and get more reason into it, I'm all for that.
I'm not sure where your question's coming from there.
Well, how could you do a deal with that Senate over the last 3 years?
Yeah, I think when Malcolm Turnbull took over, he was very approachable. He rang the crossbench on his very first day as Prime Minister and spoke to them directly. Ministers started coming directly to us and speaking a lot more, and the relationship, actually, as far as I was concerned, started to grow. It was pretty good from where I was sitting, and the reality was I've always tried to give the government ministers a good hearing. Mm-hmm. And you're right, I've actually said that in the last 24 hours. I feel like he was just buttering us up to make sure that we said he's a good Prime Minister publicly, so that way he could bang, pull the trigger, and everybody would think, oh, but the crossbench has even been saying he's a good Prime Minister.
Let's swap notes afterwards about his style. Absolutely. But you know what's funny is that for all this talk, unworkable Senate, we need double dissolution election, we need blah, blah, blah. No word of the Senate since in this campaign.
Yes, absolutely right. But let's look at this year alone in the Senate. What have we dealt with? We've dealt with getting electoral reform through, albeit extremely rushed and bypassing any proper parliamentary scrutiny like just about anything else will. And then we had the trigger bills. Yeah. That was it. We're, what, 6 months into the year, essentially 6 months into the year, and that's what we've dealt with.
Ricky, did you get up and you thought, I'm going to make a speech saying no to this double dissolution bill, no to this Australian Building Construction Commission, and sayonara to my wonderful Senator's wage? Your wife must have nearly strangled you, mate.
No, at the end of the day, I will go back to doing whatever the heck I have to do to make a living after all this. The Australian Building and Construction Commission, we'll get to that. With the Australian Building and Construction Commission, it was going to be political suicide for me to actually support it. Right. But I was actually looking at it and seriously considering giving the government my support. All I wanted to do was, one, try to break down what the government had been saying publicly, which was corruption, corruption, corruption. And even some government supporters come on saying that's not the intent of the bill. It's an industry watchdog to tackle breaches of contraventions of civil law within the building and construction industry. I mean, even government supporters came out and publicly said that. I just wanted to take the ideology out of it, take the focus away from just unions, because it's not just people within the union movement who may do the wrong thing within the building and construction industry. There is unscrupulous employers as well. So it used to be a full service regulator when it was first introduced, and that was all I was asking. And there wasn't even a legislative change. All the minister had to do was write a little letter, basically, a ministerial direction, and they would have had my support. So they could have.
Thought they were serious.
Well, I knew they were serious, but
I mean, sorry, I knew getting a compromise. No.
When I had essentially, in principle, support, I thought, well, this is it. I'm going to have to defend myself publicly for supporting the ABCC, but the government's going to do what I thought. But as we got closer, about a week out, the government pulled support, and I thought, well, they don't want that. They really want this to fail.
They wanted it to fail. They needed this election, Ricky. But
registered orgs was up to be debated after the ABCC. That was pulled the second the ABCC was rejected.
I didn't check. I don't know what a senator earns, but it'll be a lot more than an unemployed sawmiller. I mean, what are you going to do if you lose?
Well, I'm not going to lose. I'm going to give it a good crack, and I'm going to be back in. But if I do lose, I don't know. The reality is I've spoken to other people within Parliament before, and it's like a magnet. Once you're gone, you'll just get drawn back to it one way or another. And I'll cheekily say, in the best Arnie voice, I'll be back.
But has it changed you, this experience?
Yeah, definitely. Having that internal knowledge of how Parliament works and how probably 80+% of what the public sees is just a facade, it's a game, it's not the way that it's, it's what the people, elected representatives are saying publicly and not necessarily what they really believe or think. It's a talking notes that they're being given, and they're going down the two-party system path that we've been for a long time. I've always been cynical, but it's made me more cynical. But, I will come back in one way or another and try to keep them honest one way or another.
Ricky Muir, good luck to you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.